I'm Dane Young with UGAsports.com, as always with my friend Jim Donnan here on our UGAsports.com YouTube page and podcast feed. And Coach, another one of your friends from your ESPN days. Most people have to stay up a little late to see Stanford Steve over on Scott Van Pelt Sports Center. Why don't you tell me how you got to know him and bring him into our conversation?
Well, we appreciate Steve being on with us today. I had a chance to get to know him when I was up there long time ago. He was doing a lot of ESPN radio, and he would sneak around and we'd talk about which games to bet on and things like that. But I never would bet, but he would a little bit. But the biggest thing about it, he just loves sports, good family man, and his association with Scott. You know, behind every great talent, there's always a guy that really is very much involved. And these two guys are inseparable. They work good together, and they really do like each other, and we're glad to have you with us there, Steve.
I appreciate you having me on, Coach. It's been a long time. Good to see your face. I know we're texting all the time, but we're getting these things up and running, and hopefully we get things back to normal. I got to pick your brain about a possible vacation spot down in old Georgia later this summer.
We can get you on any kind of vacation spot you want. I don't know what kind of price we can get, but we can help you out. But a lot of people don't know, you're from Connecticut, but actually played, I guess it was a Pac-10 when you were the champions, but played tight end there. And that was a great year back in, 1962? No, what year was that?
No, we were the Rose Bowl team that lost, Coach. You're thinking of old Jim Plunkett. Those aren't my days. Those are the legends back in the day in the early 70s. My last game was the Rose Bowl, Y2K, first day of 2000. After the 99 season, we won the Pac-12. We lost to Dayne. That year, he won the Heisman Trophy. Everybody always talks about, you remember the winners and, the losers go by. A lot of people forgot that, we got things going that year and set all kinds of records offensively. And what made it special for me was I went to Stanford was obviously the school I chose, but back in the back of my mind, growing up, January, New Year's Day, it's my birthday. And I always envisioned trying to be in that big bowl game, on my birthday. And that ended up being my 23rd birthday and something I'll never forget. The outcome was what it was, but, I battled back from injury to get in that game and have a shot in the fourth quarter was something I think about all the time. And I was really fortunate, the teammates I had and the coaches, that you embrace the journey. We embraced the journey that year with some bad losses early, and we rallied the troops and won the Pac-10.
Yeah, I know. Last year you were telling me about you guys before COVID had a reunion. It's nothing like going out and seeing your old players and coaches. And for the most part, the guys that were really the good guys then are the same now, and they're successful like you. And it was good to hear you talk about that. Let's just go on into, college football. I know you cover a lot of different sports there on the Sports Center with us, SVP. But at this point, how do you envision the season starting out now with everybody getting ready to have these full stadiums and all? And what y'all's plans up at ESPN as far as you're going to really be back and rock and rolling on all the full-time covering insights on, in person, or how's it going to work?
Yeah, there's a lot of meetings to be had now that we got schedules. Obviously, the NFL has theirs out. College has theirs. ESPN announced the opening weekend, first couple games. The guys out in the desert got game of the year lines out. So it really feels like we're on the verge of getting back to normal, and possibly me going out on the road and, doing some man on the street stuff for Scott's show. We always have fun with that. But just being, in it, I keep going back to, you mentioned I grew up in Connecticut, but last week, watching the Knicks play at home in front of the fans in the Garden, the Bruins full capacity now in Boston in front of a home, full place. This is the stuff, that we really miss, that I missed. I know that. And no sport in the world, where home field matters more to me than college football. And to see these schools announce that they're going back to, all fans back, season ticket, guarantees are going out, and, everybody's trying to do their schedule and where they'll be. I'm sure Georgia fans got those bye weeks looked at to see when the weddings could come. down there in the fall. So yeah, it's really exciting. I'm real interested in the sport as a whole, though. I'm kind of down right now with the way things have shaped. I think, when I say that, I just feel like when we're talking about the big picture of the sport and the ability to win a national title, I think we got to open it up to more teams. I think we're ready to get out there because, I'm a Pac-12, Pac-10 guy. I know they've blown chances to get into playoff. They've had opportunities, various teams. But it just feels like to me the sport is on, not broken, but it's right on that line where we have so many teams that are on the outside looking in for what everybody plays for. And a lot of instances, those teams should be blaming themselves, but I just keep coming back to the word opportunity. I think we need to, not equalize it, but we need to open more doors for more teams to get in. And, I thought the FCS football, bracket was awesome, as it is every year. Got a little more shine now in the spring. But I'm not saying 16. I'm just, we got to open it up a little bit more to get these teams a crack at a title.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And the thing about it, football is one of the few sports where you just about got to be undefeated or one loss to win the national championship. All these other sports, you can stub your toe a few times. But talking, and Dayne's going to come in here in a second, but talking locally here, you're right out there. You and the Bear have your own show. You got people calling and checking things. What's the perception right now of UGA? And, don't sugarcoat it, but at the same time, give us a little love too. What's the perception nationally of where Georgia is and where they're going?
Well, I'll start with the outsiders. I think, outside the conference, I think people are a little bit frustrated, as I imagine Georgia fans are being on that front doorstep so many times in recent years under Kirby and just not being able to get over that hump. And that hump has been a national championship. It's been an SEC title game, that would have led to a probable national championship. Now you look at this year and they got a blockbuster week one. But I think I love what Georgia's done. I think there was some timing. You and I were talking all off, during the season last year, the quarterback position, if they had this, at the end of the year, they got their guy. And things look pretty darn good. So I would be as excited as anybody. Understand the offseason injury, struck him again at the wide receiver position again. But, the cupboards are full. I know people have their takes on Kirby and always point to the SEC title game or, the national championship against Alabama. But when you go in day in and day out in the offseason, recruiting, getting coaching staffs all together, I think he's done a phenomenal job. I love the guy more than most people because I've seen him. I was in the press conference after Tua throws that pass at Mercedes-Benz, and I was in the back off the curtain after Kirby got down from the podium, and I saw his face. And, he's talking, Booger was back there, and him and Booger had a big hug, and Herb Street's back there, and it was just, he just said so close, that close. And it's just the littlest things that happen, and that's how close they were. Nobody's been closer. You can say whoever you want. They were right there. And I know they think about it a lot, but I think as time goes on, you got to keep looking forward. How do we improve? And I think he's taking the steps to do that, at least from what I've seen on the outside looking in this offseason, gearing up for what should be a tremendous season.
Steve, you mentioned opening up things for more teams to be involved in the playoff. I'll just tell you my pipe dream. You see over my shoulder the Manchester United and the Roma banners here. I want promotion and relegation in college football. I think that'd be phenomenal. I don't think it'll ever happen. There's too many things that would have to happen. But just imagine a Sun Belt team popping up into the SEC every year. Who knows?
Those teams were more than qualified last year. I go back to look at those. Louisiana, whoever, Coastal and those teams, they proved what they had to do. I'm really excited to see what those two. I know Louisiana opens up in Austin, right, against Texas this year. I think that's a quirky game for old Sark to be the first game as the Longhorns coach when you got the Raging Cajuns coming in.
I did want to ask you, though, about you and Scott Van Pelt have been kind of ahead of the curve, I think, with a lot of the sports betting, either just as fun, but also just as informational in your broadcast. With it becoming more and more mainstream, how do you see this going for media partners and sports gambling as it kind of opens up around the country? Where do you think this is headed next?
I think it's only going to get bigger. I mean, we got NFL. I mean, you know, how archaic was the NFL in their ways for years, and now they got a darn team in Las Vegas. When you look at the money that partnerships are throwing, you know, stadiums are going to be, you know, I think taking over sponsorships by these likes of these DraftKings and FanDuel and all that stuff. But I think it's. I mean, the issue I think with the college sports is you just have so many people that are used to their ways, which have been with the same ways for years and years and years. And I think, you know, when you saw the conference overturn and all that stuff, I think that was just a matter of getting new minds in place, you know, and having, you know, new brainstorms and just having new ideas. You know, really excited to see what, you know, Pac-12 just got a new commissioner. Really excited to see. I like what he's seen or what he said so far, but I just think it's people having a trust and, you know, when we were back in our old conferences, there was just a trust level there that nothing was going to be broken. And then slowly but surely, you know, commissioners retire and, you know, you get new assistant commissioners and different ideas and stuff like that, you know, comes along with that. So I think the same thing with the gambling forefront. I think they're going to open their eyes. I mean, you know, here in Maryland, you know, Maryland is the school that joined the Big Ten because they you know, the money. And, you know, now they're not doing so well financially. And I understand there's been a lot going on with that kind of stuff. But you look at the opportunity that these schools have when it comes to money and games on TV and partnerships that way. I think the gambling front is only going to help things when it comes to that stuff and make things bigger and better for the fans.
That's a good point. Going forward here, talking a little bit about this season, who's somebody that really under the radar you think might have a little, and I don't want you to talk about Notre Dame because this is not a Notre Dame show. My man loves Notre Dame, but who do you think's got a shot to maybe jump in there beside, everybody knows about OU, you know, about the big time teams, Alabama, Clemson. Who's somebody under the radar a little bit that our fans could look at this year?
I think there's one, you know, they got a lot of love in the off season when these sports books were putting out lines on possible games. But I look at what Matt Campbell's done at Iowa State. I know everybody loves what, you know, how the things ended for Oklahoma and what Rattler did. I still want to see more from them. I know their defense has been talked about as not being seen in big spots when they play out of conference. But I think Iowa State is a team, when you look at their returning starters and the positions that they have guys back in. They got All-American coming back at running back. The quarterback is very experienced. I always look at the tight ends, coach. They got a couple that are really, really good. That Matt Campbell, I think, does a really good job of out-formationing people. And you see the game changing with these guys that are 6'7" and can run like wide receivers. When you get those guys on the edge, that opens up all new kind of things you could do in the run game, whether you're going to go with the zone scheme, if you're going to go with the old toss, or you're going to come back with some counter and stuff like that. Those guys are just so athletic and could do things, you know, that guys, you know, were never asked to do before. So I look at Iowa State. I look at a team. I know the Bear likes them. I like Kentucky. As an interesting thing, they got a quarterback in Levis from Penn State. The schedule, I think, is kind of favorable. I know Bears pointed them out, but I look at them as, you know, you say up and coming. It's just a team that's, you know, trying to knock on the door. We know how dominant Georgia has been the East, but I think Kentucky can surprise some people also.
Yeah, they're always going to be there under Stoops. They're getting, I would say they're definitely knocking on the door for sure. And one other question here about the season itself. Who have you feel like is the best quarterback in the country coming back?
I think Howell at Carolina, North Carolina, Sam Howell. I think he's tremendous. Saw what he did against A&M with not hardly any of his guys. You saw what they did in the draft and where his running backs and wide receivers went. But I think Howell, I mean, when you go back and look at it, he had a better freshman year than Trevor Lawrence did in the ACC, and Trevor Lawrence won the national championship. And no one ever points that out. But Sam has done an unbelievable job. If I didn't go to Stanford, Coach, I was going to go to Chapel Hill. Mac Brown was there and recruited me, and I'm glad I didn't, because Mac left a year later, and I would have been pretty broken up about that. But I look at Sam Howell at Carolina as the best quarterback in the country. Arm strength, mobility, he's got enough. I like his elusiveness in the pocket and his accuracy. He throws a really, really good deep ball. And as we know, Mac's recruited, really well recently, and I expect them to have a big year with guys, stepping up and taking the spots that I mentioned, where they had guys drafted in the first 3 rounds at the receiver and running back position.
So you got the West Coast down and everything, and you and I talked off air about JT. Of course, he's the man here now for Georgia, and he's got a good supporting cast, a lot of good players. What's your take on JT, and how's he perceived nationally?
I think last year was absolutely enormous for him to get experience. We've seen, hell, look at Costello coming from Stanford, going to Mississippi State. People were going to give him the Heisman Trophy after week 1 last year, and he lost the starting job of, week in and week out, having to go against those SEC defenses. But I think when you look at JT, the experience he got playing those games in conference play. Now, I know he didn't play against Alabama, and everybody's going to point to that, but just the wherewithal, the getting familiar with seeing, how much better the athleticism is on the defensive side in that conference as opposed to the Pac-12. It's not close. I try and tell people all the time, look at the draft. Look at where guys are going. There's hardly any defensive guys drafted. And when you compare Pac-12 defenses against SEC defenses, for example, just look at the talent. Look at. I know everybody talks about recruiting rankings. I look forward. Look at where the guys go in the draft, and then what they do on Sundays. It's dominated by guys that play in the SEC. So I think last year was huge for him. Listen, the ability's there. We know that. I think he had to get it himself to 100%. He did that, and heck, I watched the spring game, and he looked pretty darn good in the spring game also. So I'm fired up to see JT. It's not. I don't know how to say this. It's sometimes it's really unfortunate to see what happened, for him at SC, where he gets hurt and then they get a guy that comes in and steps in and play the way that he did with Slovis. But for JT to get that opportunity at another big time, school, I think is tremendous for him. And I'm really excited to see what he does with that opportunity. Because like I said, I think the talent's there. There's no doubt about that. And he's only going to get better as the season goes on.
You had mentioned the Heisman, and historically that's been a quarterback and maybe a running back award too. Recently, mainly quarterback. But coming off a season with a wide receiver winning the Heisman Trophy, do you think that opens up the potential that the trophy could go to maybe a bigger group of guys, or is it still mainly a quarterback thing?
I think it's opened some eyes for sure. Devontae had one of the most unbelievable seasons I've ever seen. The guy was just unstoppable. And he was better without Waddle than anybody imagined. And people thought Waddle was the one coming in for this year. But I do love the narrative. I go back all the way to when Randy Moss with Marshall was at that Heisman Trophy ceremony. That opened my eyes way back then when I saw a guy like that do the things that he did. These guys are absolutely incredible with the athletic ability they have, and now the speed. If you're not under 4.4, you're slow now at that position. But I love, what you're getting in the reverse game and all that stuff like that. Returning punts, and I think the coaches have earned these guys' trust. I know everybody talks about taking hits off guys. Where can you take off hits, guys, on guys in the course of games and guys getting out of bounds? Devontae, Waddle was their punt returner. He goes out. Devontae says, "Give me the punt. I'll take over the punt return duties. This can't be too hard." And he excelled at that. So it's really opened my eyes. And I just, the quarterback obviously is always going to be there with the face of the program. And whether, that certain school has that quarterback returning, obviously is always a talking point because of how important they are. But wide receivers now, with the amount of balls that are put in the air every single Saturday in the sport, they've become a commodity. And, talking to people down in Tuscaloosa, even, like, they're fired up to see what this new crop is. They had record setting the last, 4 or 5 first rounders the last 2 years in the draft. These people are even more excited for this incoming batch. So it's the new hot, thing in the sport where, wide receivers are getting the recognition. Obviously that Heisman definitely helps. So I think the stats are just continuing to grow with those guys and seeing how, when they prove their dependability time after time.
Yeah, good point there. And that was a good question, Dayne. Wrapping it up here, our big rival certainly within the conference is Florida. Where do you see the Gators right now? The way they folded down the stretch, they had some things happen. They lost a lot of good players, Kyle Pitts, Trask, the quarterback. What do you think about the Gators going into 2021?
I don't want to say last year was a missed opportunity, but when you look back at it, Coach, it really feels like that. I still cannot believe they lost that game to LSU in the Swamp. I'm going to look back at that game as one of the most surprising outcomes I've seen in the sport, and easily in the 2000s. That just totally blew my mind. I love Kyle Trask. I'm excited to see what he could do at the next level. Pitts is absolutely going to be a superstar. We talk about that tight end position. He took it to places I've never even dreamt of tight ends going when I'm trying to play video games and that stuff. That guy was just incredible. But I think their schedule is kind of tough. They got to go. I believe it's going to LSU. They got to go to LSU. I think they get Bama too this year. Is that correct?
You got Bama at home. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's that. They had the guys all sit out the bowl game. That didn't look well. I thought that was a really up and down year for Coach Mullen. When he starts with the loss in College Station and talks about packing the swamp, and we're in the middle of a pandemic. It felt like a roller coaster. So I would not. I obviously love Georgia over Florida this year when it comes to. I just think Florida has too much inexperience at some vital positions. Whereas when you look at Georgia, they have the experience where you want experience when it comes to playing those conference games.
Yeah, any way you look at it, they did the job against us last year, and then, of course, Pickett didn't play. But the one thing about Mullen, I'll give him a lot of kudos here. He lost the last 3 games last season, and today he just got a new 6-year contract and $1.5 million raise. So he must be doing something right. So, but I like our chances against them too, and I like the fact that you would take your time from your busy schedule. You've always been a good friend. I've enjoyed our back and forth for a long time, and our fans can see your enthusiasm for the sport. And I told Dayne when we got you on here that everybody would see how much you love college football. But we appreciate you being on with us today, Stevie boy.
My man, I appreciate it. I just wanted to confirm we had to do this in the afternoon because you had to watch the French Open tennis this morning, right?
Yeah, I was watching that a little bit, but Nadal got a good break today. I was telling Dayne, Rublev lost, and I don't know if Barrett bet on that, but that was a bad loss for Rublev, and that's going to help my boy Nadal a little bit. But he's still got a tough draw. But hey, I know you got to go pick up your kids, so we appreciate you being on with us, and we'll be talking to you during the season. All right?
Anytime you need me, Coach, I'm here for you. You know that. Dayne, pleasure. I appreciate you guys having me on. It was fun.